Okay, so this is a brief overview of MLOps, or machine learning ops, and we're going to talk about Azure and Kubeflow and Kubernetes. So if you're watching this video, I assume you already have a good working understanding of Azure, Kubeflow, and Kubernetes. So what we're going to talk is basically about the machine learning operations flow. So the first thing you need to do in Azure is set up an Azure Container Registry to store Docker images, because Kubeflow uses the Docker images for the pipelines, the pipeline steps and the dependencies. So the Azure Container Registry, after you create it, is attached or associated with the Kubernetes cluster. And you also should define a persistent volume such as an Azure Blob Store and attach that to the Kubernetes cluster, because you will need a place to store Kubeflow pipeline data and files. And you also need a way for interaction between Kubeflow and Kubernetes and other Azure services. So that's accomplished via Azure Active Directory, where you create a service principal, and the service principal has within it a client secret, and then roles depending on what you would like that service principal to do and how you would like it to interact with other Azure services. So from the standpoint of a data science developer, the developer on their local machine, their MacBook Pro laptop or Windows laptop, would use Docker to push and pull images to and from the Azure Container Registry. So you, as a developer, would build your local project Docker image and push that to ACR. And you would also, on your local machine, or possibly within a Jupyter notebook, create a pipeline and compile it into a tar.gz file, and upload it into the Kubeflow pipelines dashboard. And then in the dashboard, you can create a Kubeflow experiment, and then in that experiment, you create a run, and it uses the pipeline. So the pipeline typically, but not necessarily, has 4 steps: a pre-processing step, a training step, register step, and deploy step. So when the pipeline is done running, you get a URL, a deployment URL from it, and you can retrieve that from the dashboard. And once you have that URL, you submit a GET or a POST request to it, and it is scored based on the payload of your GET or POST request. For example, if your pipeline has to do with image recognition and deciding whether or not an image is of a particular type, you would, in your GET or POST request, submit an actual image to that deployment URL, and the result would be the score of whether or not it is the image that is expected. So some other considerations: you can and should use source control systems such as GitHub for this in production environments especially. So using Python, for example, and this can all be constructed in R, by the way, but I'm just using Python as an example. If you have, you can create via Python, you can create pipeline definition files and then back them and store them in GitHub. And you can also do the same thing for runs, which are created from pipelines, and you can put that stuff in source control. And also, if you're looking to minimize costs, you should use spot instances where you can for aspects of the machine learning operations flow, such as model training, data pre-processing, and batch inferences. So hope this helps you as you're deciding how to deploy your machine learning operations, especially as it relates to Azure and Kubernetes and Kubeflow. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching.